Crystal light trembled on the chandeliers, a cork sighed, and violins stitched a bright, careful line through the air. Have you ever stood in the middle of a celebration and felt like the only person no one came to see? Claire Bennett moved along the edge of the ballroom, headset warm against her ear, clipboard tucked to her side. Lemon polish and sea salt drifted in from the terrace doors. Shoes whispered over marble. She checked a table card, fixed a crooked napkin, breathed. The Harbor Light Foundation. Gala glowed gold like late afternoon on the bay. She didn't take up space. She made space. That was her gift. Her mother's words brushed the back of her mind, soft as a hand, smoothing hair. Hard work is your dignity, honey. Across the room, the Crosswind Hotel doors parted, a ripple. Nathaniel Cross stepped in calm power in a charcoal suit, eyes like fog lights sweeping the channel. Claire noticed the pause he created, the way conversations leaned. Then she looked away. They were a mile apart, even in the same room. A tray passed, citrus and chill. The band held a note. Claire straightened a place setting and let herself feel it, a quiet pulse of pride. This small order in a vast, glittering world. She didn't know the worst night of her life would begin right here, under these lights, and led her somewhere she never thought she'd belong. And that's how it began, the story neither of them saw coming. Strings hummed softly through the grand ballroom, a melody that felt like honey poured over glass. The chandeliers shimmered, scattering gold across the marble floor. Waiters in white jackets moved like clockwork, carrying trays of champagne that caught the light with every step. From the terrace, the bay wind slipped in, carrying the faint scent of salt and jasmine. At the far end of the hall, Claire Bennett adjusted the cuff of her black blazer, the fabric faintly dusted with powder from a rushed linen change. Table 8 needs 3 more chairs, someone called over the headset. She nodded once, already in motion. Her heels clicked briskly on the marble, a rhythm of quiet authority. Tonight was the Harbor Light Foundation Gala, Crosswind Hotel's most important night of the year. It was the kind of evening where names floated like currency, where laughter had an edge and dresses whispered in silk. Claire had worked the gala for 5 years, long enough to know every corner of this glittering world, yet still stand outside its light. Her reflection flashed briefly in a mirrored column, tidy bun, calm face, a thin pencil tucked behind one ear. She looked capable, invisible, but capable. And that was enough. Her mother's voice echoed gently in memory. Hard work is your dignity. Honey, people may not notice, but life does. Claire, the ice sculpture's melting too fast. I'm on it. She moved through the maze of tables, passing servers balancing silver trays and guests whose diamonds caught the light like a constellation. Each step was part of the choreography she had memorized long ago. Anticipate, adapt, disappear. Near the stage, a microphone squeaked. Claire winced. She reached the tech booth before the manager could even call her name, adjusting the levels, smoothing the panic with a quiet, "It's all right, just breathe." The sound steadied, and applause followed. A brief moment of calm. Then the doors at the far end opened, and the air shifted. Nathaniel Cross had arrived. The room didn't go silent, but it felt like it wanted to. Conversation softened, glances tilted. He walked with that unspoken gravity that came with old money and newer ambition, a man whose presence made others straighten their posture. His charcoal gray suit fit like intention. His cufflinks caught the chandeliers like sparks. Claire saw him from across the room, only for a second. She didn't linger. The last thing she needed was to be caught staring at the man who, rumor said, could buy or break any business on this coast. To her, he was a symbol carved from a different world, one she had polished, dusted, and arranged but never touched. She turned back to her clipboard. "Lights at 40%, she murmured into the headset. Let the gold tone breathe. Still. Some part of her noticed the way he paused near the silent auction table. his gaze scanning the crowd as though reading its language. He didn't smile, didn't need to. People adjusted themselves around him like water around stone. "Claire, we've got a spill near the dessert bar." She was already moving. Napkins, towels, quick words with the server, her hands steady, her breathing even. That was her strength, the ability to stay composed when others cracked. As she bent to wipe the marble, the scent of champagne rose faintly, bright and sharp. For a second, she remembered her father, long gone now, laughing over a cheap bottle on New Year's Eve, saying, "One day you'll be around the fancy kind. Kiddo, just promise me you'll never lose your footing." She smiled to herself, small and secret, still trying. Dad. The music swelled. Someone toasted near the stage, glasses ringing like bells. Claire rose, smoothing her skirt, scanning the crowd again. Every table gleamed, every flower stood perfect. For one rare moment, everything worked. Bennett, her supervisor, Charles, whispered through the earpiece, "Mr. Cross just asked for a last-minute seat near the front. Handle it quietly." Her pulse skipped. "Copy that." She moved toward the VIP section, adjusting the layout in her mind. There was space if she shifted the donors from table 4, Mr. and Mrs. Danforth, easygoing. Wouldn't complain. She signaled a server, swapped a place card, checked the symmetry, all smooth. From her peripheral vision, she saw him again, Nathaniel Cross, now speaking with the mayor, up close. His voice carried the calm of someone used to being obeyed. When he glanced briefly her way, their eyes met only for a heartbeat, maybe less, enough for her to feel seen and unseen all at once. She looked away first. "Seat ready," she said softly into the headset. Charles's voice crackled back. "Good work. You always deliver, Bennett." She exhaled slowly. Compliments were rare currency here. For a moment, pride warmed her chest, quiet but real. She had built her place one long night at a time, without shortcuts, without favors. The string quartet began its second set. Waiters circled with flutes of champagne. A thin layer of gold dust shimmered across the surface of each drink, a touch of luxury that guests would photograph. Hashtag forget. Claire lingered near the service corridor, observing. This was her favorite part, the moment before chaos, when everything looked effortless. She didn't need to belong to the scene to love its rhythm. She simply needed to make sure it stayed whole. Claire, Rachel, one of the junior coordinators, whispered beside her, "You ever wish you were out there instead of back here?" Claire smiled. "Someone has to keep the stars shining." Rachel chuckled softly, but there was a wistful edge to it. "You make it look easy." "It's not," Claire said, eyes tracing the chandelier's slow shimmer, "but it's worth it." And she meant it. She liked the feeling of competence, the satisfaction of quiet success. Pride didn't have to be loud to exist. It could live in the steady hands that fixed what others overlooked. Across the room, Nathaniel Cross laughed at something the mayor said, a sound low, brief, unexpected. Claire caught it like a note in a symphony. He looked almost human. Then he turned away, already surrounded by people who spoke his language. The clock above the bar read 8:45. Still hours to go before teardown, before the lights would dim and silence would fall over the marble again. She adjusted her headset, ready for whatever came next. But somewhere inside her, beneath the discipline and the layers of calm, something small shifted. A flicker she couldn't name. Maybe it was pride, maybe it was exhaustion, or maybe, just maybe, it was the faint sense that her life, so carefully ordered, was about to tilt. She looked once more across the room, toward the man who had changed the air when he entered. Then she turned away, her hand brushing the edge of a champagne tray as she passed, unaware of how fragile that balance truly was. Outside, the wind off the bay rose, rattling the glass doors, carrying the promise of rain. Inside, beneath a chandelier's golden glow, Claire Bennett straightened her spine and let herself breathe. For this moment, everything was perfect. But perfection, as she was about to learn, never lasts long. The violin's note lingered like a thread of light over crystal glass. Claire adjusted the last centerpiece, a pale bloom trembling in the candle air. Everything gleamed: the marble floor, the glassware, even the soft sheen on the guest's skin. For a moment, she let herself feel it again, that quiet pride, the rhythm she knew so well. Then she turned. A tray of champagne was passing, a dozen flutes catching the gold of the chandeliers. She stepped sideways, a habit born from years of avoiding collision. But someone else stepped back at the same time. A ripple of fabric, the faintest brush of shoulders, and then the sound. A single, sharp shatter. Champagne sprayed in a glittering arc, falling like rain against the marble. For a heartbeat, everything still moved: laughter, music, the hum of conversation. Then silence slid through the room. Claire froze, her breath caught halfway between apology and disbelief. The golden liquid had splashed across a charcoal gray suit. The same suit she had seen earlier. Nathaniel Cross stood before her, motionless, drops glinting against the perfect line of his lapel. Someone gasped. A glass rolled and clinked against the base of a column. "I'm so..." Her words tangled as she reached instinctively for a napkin. Trembling hands outstretched. "Do not touch me!" His voice cut through the hush, low and sharp, the kind of tone that froze air. Claire's hands stopped mid-motion. Heat flooded her cheeks. For a second she didn't understand what had happened, only that the music had stopped, and dozens of eyes had turned toward her. It was an accident," she managed, voice small. Nathaniel looked down at the stain, then at her, his expression unreadable. "Accidents," he said evenly, "have consequences." The words landed heavier than they should have. Around them, whispers started, thin and eager. Someone chuckled. Another phone lifted too fast, too familiar. The room felt smaller. Her chest burned. Everyone's watching. She knelt automatically, gathering broken glass with shaking fingers. A drop of champagne slid from her wrist to the floor, soft as rain. "Please let me clean this up," she whispered. No one moved to help. The crowd shifted in a quiet wave, distance forming like a moat. Somewhere, a waiter hesitated, unsure. The head of security frowned but stayed back. The hierarchy of wealth was its own silent rulebook. Anne Claire knew her place in it. Nathaniel stepped back once, watching her as if she were a problem to be handled, not a person. The golden stain spread slowly over his jacket, dripping toward the polished shoes she had admired hours earlier. Her breath trembled. "Don't cry! Don't!" She heard laughter again, short, cruel. A ripple of amusement from the corner where a group of young executives stood. One of them muttered, "Guess even the staff wants his attention." The words sliced through her like paper cuts. She swallowed hard, kept gathering shards, one after another. The marble reflected her face back at her, blurred, bent, small. "Miss Bennett," Charles's voice hissed through the headset. "Step away from him, now." Her pulse jumped. She rose too quickly, and one of the glasses she held slipped, striking the floor again with a hollow crack. More laughter. Someone clapped softly. Mock applause. Nathaniel's expression didn't change. He simply turned to his aide, who was already offering a replacement jacket. "See to this?" he said, brushing a drop from his sleeve. His voice stayed calm, too calm. Discretion would be appreciated. The aide nodded. Claire caught his look, sympathy and warning mixed together. She wanted to speak, to explain, to disappear. All she managed was a faint, "I'm sorry, Mr. Cross." He didn't reply. The quartet hesitated, then began to play again, notes thin as apology. Conversation stumbled back to life, forced and uneasy, but the room had shifted. The warmth was gone. Claire stood rooted for a moment, clutching her towel, unsure what to do with her hands. Around her, the night continued, pretending nothing had happened, but she could feel the invisible stain spreading beyond the marble, into whispers, into memory. Her throat tightened. She turned toward the service corridor, walking carefully, head down, heart pounding. Each step echoed louder than the music. She reached the hallway behind the ballroom, the air cooler there, faintly smelling of detergent and lemon. Her hands shook. She pressed them flat against her skirt. Breathe. Through the door. She heard laughter again, bright and cruel, the kind that stuck to the walls. Her mother's voice surfaced in her mind. That steady refrain, hard work is your dignity. Honey. But right now, dignity felt far away, some fragile thing she'd left on the marble floor among the broken glass. Her eyes stung. She blinked hard, refusing the tears. Pride first. Always pride. A shadow crossed the hallway. Charles. His face was tight, color rising in his cheeks. Claire. His tone was sharp, low. Office. Now. She opened her mouth, but no words came, only a small, fractured sound. He grabbed her arm, not roughly, but firmly enough to say this wasn't a discussion. "You've embarrassed this company in front of the most powerful man in the city," he hissed. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Her pulse roared in her ears. The hallway lights blurred. She wanted to tell him the truth, that it was an accident, that she'd done everything right, that sometimes even perfection breaks. But the words stayed locked behind her teeth. Instead, she nodded once. "Yes, sir." Charles exhaled sharply, released her arm, and turned down the corridor. She followed, silent, the click of her heels echoing like guilt. Behind them, the gala music swelled again, smooth, polished, pretending nothing had fractured, but Claire knew better. Something had cracked open tonight. Not just a glass, not just her composure, something deeper. As the office door closed behind her, she caught one last glimpse through the glass pane of the ballroom, beyond the chandelier, glowing, Nathaniel Cross standing beneath it, his expression calm, untouchable. The light caught the faint wet mark on his jacket before he disappeared into the crowd, and just like that, the night went on perfect on the surface. Broken underneath? Claire stood still, hands trembling at her sides, a single thought echoing like a drumbeat in her chest. This isn't over. The clock on the office wall ticked too loudly. Claire sat across from Charles, the hum of the air conditioner louder than his breathing. The gala still pulsed faintly in her ears, the laughter, the music, the shattering glass replaying in cruel loops. Charles's voice broke the silence, sharp and exhausted. "Do you have any idea what you've done tonight?" He didn't wait for an answer. "You embarrassed this company before the man who owns half the city." His tone wavered between disbelief and anger. "Do you realize who that was? Nathaniel Cross doesn't just attend events, he buys them. He could have us blacklisted before sunrise." Claire kept her hands folded on her lap. Her palms were cold. "It was an accident," she said quietly. Charles leaned forward, his tie slightly loosened, face flushed with stress. "Accidents don't happen when you're paying attention." She met his eyes then, steady but tired. "They do. To everyone." He stared at her for a long second, then sighed, the sound rough as gravel. "You've always been one of my best, Claire. But this..." His hand moved through the air as if trying to erase what couldn't be undone. "You've put me in a position I can't defend. I understand." Her voice was calm, almost too calm. She could feel the tension in her shoulders, the trembling in her stomach, but she wouldn't let it show. Dignity first, always. Charles stood, pacing near the window. Below, the city glittered crosswind tower visible in the distance. A glass monolith in the night. "You'll have to step back until we review this," he said finally. "Suspension, maybe termination, I don't know yet." Claire nodded once. There was nothing else to say. He looked at her then, something almost soft flickering behind the frustration. "You're good at what you do. You always were. But sometimes being good isn't enough. She stood slowly. Thank you, Charles. For what? For saying it out loud. He blinked, not sure how to take that. When she left the office, the hallway lights hummed overhead, cool and sterile. A few remaining staff glanced up as she passed, whispering in the silence that followed. She kept her eyes straight ahead. Outside, the city had changed. The air was damp, heavy with the smell of rain that hadn't yet fallen. She pulled her coat tighter, stepping into the streetlight's weak halo. Her reflection followed in the puddles, blurred, trembling. She started walking. The night felt endless, the kind that swallowed sound. The laughter from a nearby bar spilled into the street, sharp and cruel, like the echoes of the gala. Every sound seemed to mock her, the click of her own shoes, the rustle of leaves against the curb. She passed the Crosswind Hotel on her way home. Through the glass doors, she could still see the faint glow of chandeliers being dimmed, staff clearing tables, a place resetting itself for the next flawless illusion. Her throat tightened. It's just work, she told herself. It's not your life. But it had been. She walked faster, her breath visible now, the wind colder near the waterfront. Her thoughts came in fragments. The look on his face, the phones lifting, the laughter, the words, "Do not touch me." She reached the bridge, stopped for a moment, gripping the rail. The bay stretched below, dark and restless. Somewhere in the distance, a ferry horn echoed a long, lonely sound that seemed to understand her better than any person could. Her chest ached. She let out a shaky breath, eyes stinging. She wanted to cry, but the tears refused, caught behind something deeper than pride. When she reached her apartment, the clock above the stove read 1:42. The small space greeted her with silence. A stack of unopened mail sat on the counter. A plant by the window leaned toward the faint light of the street lamp outside. She dropped her bag, kicked off her shoes, and sat on the couch. For a moment, she just stared at the wall. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound. Her hands still smelled faintly of champagne. She rubbed them together as if she could wash the night away. "Dad," she whispered softly into the quiet, the words strange in her mouth after so long. "You'd laugh if you saw me now." The words came haltingly at first, then more freely, as if speaking to the ghost of someone who still listened. "Remember when you told me to always keep my head high? I tried, I really did. But tonight, I think I lost it somewhere between the marble floor and that man's eyes." She smiled faintly through the ache. "You'd probably say, 'So what? Kid, pick it up again.'" The clock ticked. The city murmured beyond the glass. Somewhere, far off, thunder rolled across the bay. She leaned back, letting the exhaustion settle like a blanket. The humiliation was still there, raw, heavy, but beneath it, something steadier began to form. Not anger, not yet, but a kind of quiet resolve, like the tide shifting after a storm. Her mother's voice joined the silence, soft and certain. "Hard work is your dignity. Honey," Claire exhaled, "then I'll find it again." She closed her eyes. For the first time that night, she allowed herself to breathe deeply, to stop replaying every second. A shame still clung to her, but it didn't own her. Outside, the rain finally began, gentle against the window. The sound was almost kind. By dawn, the city would wake as if nothing had happened. The gala would fade into rumor, the laughter into memory. But Claire Bennett would still rise, bruised but standing. Because even in the quiet ruin of humiliation, she knew one thing for sure. Shame would not have the final word. The morning crept in quietly, soft light spilling through half-closed blinds. The world outside was gray and damp, washed clean by the night's rain. Claire sat at the small kitchen table, still in the same t-shirt she had slept in, her hair tied loosely, her eyes tracing the slow curl of steam from a forgotten cup of coffee. It had gone cold. The smell of toast lingered, burnt at the edges. The clock ticked without hurry. Her apartment, usually neat, looked as though it had held its breath all night, shoes by the door. coat slumped across a chair, silence heavy in every corner. Her phone buzzed once. "Mom." She hesitated, then answered. "Hey, Mom." "Morning, sweetheart. You sound tired." Evelyn's voice was warm, like soft sunlight through old curtains. Claire smiled faintly, eyes still on the window. Late night, you know. Gala season. A pause, long enough for a mother's instinct to slip through. Something happened, didn't it? No, nothing bad. Claire lied gently. Just exhausting. The usual chaos. Evelyn hummed, the kind of sound that said she didn't believe a word. "You've always been so strong. Just promise me you're eating properly." "And sleeping." "I am," Claire said, glancing at the untouched toast. They spoke for a few more minutes. Weather, garden, small things meant to hold bigger silences. When the call ended, the apartment felt even quieter. Claire set her phone down and rubbed her temples. Her reflection in the window stared back, faint and tired. "You're not broken," she whispered, "just bruised." The words came from somewhere deep, somewhere that remembered the little girl her father used to lift onto his shoulders and say, "Strong spine, kiddo. The world's heavy." She stood, stretched, and walked to the sink. The cup clinked softly against the porcelain. Outside, a seagull cried above the bay. The sound was distant, lonely, but alive. For a while, she moved without thought, folding a stray blanket, wiping crumbs from the counter, trying to put order where chaos had lingered. But every action carried the echo of the night before, the look on his face, the laughter, the way the room had turned against her in an instant. She gripped the edge of the counter, breathing slowly until her hands steadied. "You survived worse things," she reminded herself. "You can survive this." Her eyes drifted toward the pair of heels by the door, black leather, scuffed from marble. One still bore a faint streak of champagne near the strap. She stared at them for a long time, then walked over, crouched down, and lifted one into her lap. The heel caught the light. Elegant, but worn. Like her. She fetched a cloth and began to clean them slow, careful strokes. Each motion steadied her heartbeat, drew her back from the edge of shame. The faint smell of polish filled the air. It was oddly comforting. "You were with me," she murmured to the shoes. Through all of it, her thumb traced the curve of the leather. "Let's try again." The more she wiped, the clearer the surface became. The more she breathed, the lighter the air felt. It wasn't about the shoes, not really. It was about reclaiming something small, ordinary, hers. The morning grew brighter. Sunlight broke through the clouds, spilling gold across the table. Dust motes floated like quiet applause. She placed the clean heels by the door, perfectly aligned. Then she sat on the floor, back against the wall, and closed her eyes. Her thoughts wandered to Charles, to the company, to the whispers she would face if she ever walked back into that building. The idea made her stomach twist, but so did the thought of giving up. Failure wasn't what defined her. It was what she did next. She stood up, took a deep breath. The air tasted faintly of coffee and rain. The city outside was beginning to wake. Cars moved below. People hurried to their lives. The world didn't care about her humiliation. It kept turning, indifferent but forgiving in its own way. Claire went to her closet, pulled out a fresh shirt, ironed it on the counter. She tied her hair back neatly, just as she always did before work. The sound of the iron hissing over fabric was grounding, familiar. When she caught her reflection again, she didn't look defeated, just quieter, more certain. She poured herself a new cup of coffee, hot this time, and stood by the window, watching sunlight glint on wet rooftops. "Maybe it's not over," she said softly. "Maybe it's just starting differently." She didn't know what waited at the office: a final warning, a dismissal, or worse, the cold looks of colleagues who had seen the video by now. But she knew she couldn't hide, not from them, not from herself. The shame had burned through her, but what remained underneath felt solid, a small core of stubbornness, of pride. She finished her coffee, rinsed the cup, and slipped on the clean heels. They clicked once against the floor, a familiar sound, steady, sure. By the door, she paused to grab her coat. Her hand hesitated on the knob, as if testing her own resolve. Then she smiled, a quiet curve of defiance. "Let's go," she whispered. Outside, the air was crisp. The rain had stopped, but the pavement still shimmered. As she walked toward the subway, her reflection followed her in the puddles, no longer blurred, just real. For the first time since the gala, her steps felt lighter. Somewhere in the city, the Crosswind Tower rose against the sky, glass bright and distant. She looked at it once, then straightened her shoulders and kept walking. She didn't know if she'd find redemption or just another storm, but she would face it, because this morning, Claire Bennett chose to rise, and that choice, quiet as it was, changed everything that would come next. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime. Claire stepped inside, coffee in hand, heart steady but alert. The mirrored walls threw her reflection back at her, composed, understated, neat. She adjusted the strap of her bag and whispered under her breath, "You've got this." The ride to the 22nd floor felt longer than usual. When the doors opened again, the familiar scent of polished wood and office paper greeted her. The sound of keyboards, distant phones, and the faint hum of air conditioning filled the air. Everything looked exactly as before, but it didn't feel the same. Eyes lifted as she walked by. Conversations dimmed, then resumed in softer tones. The whispers were quick, like wind through tall grass, impossible to catch, but easy to feel. She smiled anyway, the small kind that neither invited nor pushed away. Charles's door was half open. He looked up once, saw her, and pretended to be reading something urgent. She nodded politely, though the avoidance stung more than she'd expected. She set her things down at her desk. The monitor blinked to life, bathing her hands in pale blue light. Familiar tools, familiar armor. She straightened a stack of reports, checked her calendar, began typing notes for the morning briefing. Work first, feel later. Her coworkers passed by, some offered quick smiles. Others didn't look at her at all. One whispered near the copier, "That's her, write the gala thing." The other replied, "Yeah, I heard she's lucky she's not fired." Claire's fingers paused for half a second before continuing. Her heartbeat slowed, then steadied. She wouldn't give them more than silence. Silence was safe. Silence was strength. Hours passed quietly. Her headset buzzed. "Bennett, can you update the event files for the Harborview account?" Charles's voice, clipped but professional. No small talk, no mention of last week. "On it," she replied. Her tone was calm, neutral. She got to work, double-checking every line, every figure, every small detail. Precision became her refuge. By noon, she'd finished 3 reports and reorganized the entire department folder. When she looked up, Rachel was standing by her desk holding 2 cups of coffee. "Truce offering," Rachel said with a grin. "One's extra strong in case you plan on conquering the world before lunch." Claire laughed softly, the first real sound of the day. "You didn't have to." "Of course I did," Rachel said, sliding into the chair beside her. "Half the office is pretending you're radioactive. I figured I'd balance the energy." Claire smiled. "So, you're my neutralizer." "Exactly. Besides, I saw the video. You handled it better than most people would. If it were me, I'd still be hiding under a blanket." The words caught her off guard. She'd avoided thinking about the video, the few cruel seconds that lived online somewhere. It was just a bad moment, she said quietly. "Everyone has one," Rachel replied, taking a sip of coffee. "Yours just had better lighting." Claire couldn't help but laugh. It came out lighter this time. Real? For a moment, The tension eased. The office noise faded into a hum of normal life. Rachel leaned closer, lowering her voice. You know, people forget fast. They always do. Just keep being you. Eventually, they'll remember the work, not the scandal. I hope you're right. I'm always right, Rachel said, tapping the rim of her cup against Claire's. Coffee logic. When Rachel left, Claire sat back in her chair and exhaled slowly. The warmth from the coffee lingered in her hands. She looked at her to-do list, long and relentless, and smiled faintly. Work was still work, and she was still herself. The afternoon unfolded quietly. She fixed a scheduling error no one else had noticed. She saved a client presentation that nearly crashed minutes before the meeting. Charles stopped by briefly to ask about a file, his tone gentler this time. Good catch on the layout, he said before walking off. It wasn't praise exactly, but it was something. When the clock neared 6, the office began to empty. Papers rustled, chairs rolled back, heels clicked against the floor. Claire stayed behind, reviewing one last report. The soft rhythm of typing filled the room, steady and sure. Outside, the sky deepened into amber and violet. The city lights flickered on, one by one. She looked out through the glass wall, seeing her reflection layered over the skyline. The woman staring back wasn't defeated anymore, just quiet, still standing. Her phone buzzed a message from Rachel. Drinks later. Or are you married to that desk again? Claire typed back, maybe just coffee. Still recovering my reputation. A minute later, Rachel replied, you don't need to recover it. You're rebuilding it. Claire smiled, slipping her phone back into her bag. She shut down her computer and gathered her things. As she passed Charles's office, he looked up again. This time, he didn't look away, just gave a short nod. She returned it with one of her own. No words needed, in the elevator. Her reflection shimmered under the low light, tired but composed. When the doors opened on the ground floor, the sound of rain reached her. She stepped outside, the city washed clean again, the pavement gleaming beneath her heels. People hurried past, umbrellas blooming like dark flowers. Claire walked without one, feeling the rain on her skin, cool, real, grounding. Her mind drifted to her father's old saying, the one she'd almost forgotten. The world doesn't stop spinning just because you fell. You get up and walk with it. She smiled softly. By the time she reached the subway, the rain had softened into mist. The city lights blurred in the puddles like melted gold. Claire stopped for a moment, breathing in the scent of wet concrete and street food, the hum of life moving on. She realized then that she wasn't trying to erase what happened. She was learning to stand with it. The shame had faded into something quieter, the steady rhythm of survival. Tomorrow would bring new whispers, new challenges, maybe new grace. But tonight, walking home under the rain, she felt the smallest flicker of peace. And that, she thought, was its own kind of victory. The morning light stretched long across the office floor, pale and soft, touching the rows of desks like a quiet inspection. Claire had just set her coffee down when the internal chat chimed, all staff emergency meeting in Conference A. 10 minutes, no subject line, no context, the kind of message that made the air heavier. She exchanged a glance with Rachel across the aisle. Rachel raised an eyebrow. Claire shrugged slightly, though her pulse had already picked up. 10 minutes later, the entire department was gathered under the cool hum of fluorescent lights. Charles stood at the front, hands gripping the back of a chair as though it anchored him. His voice, usually brisk and composed, carried an edge today. "I'll make this quick," he began. "As of this morning, our parent company has finalized a full acquisition deal. Crosswind Hospitality now owns Bennett and More Events." The room fell silent. The name landed like a dropped glass. Claire's stomach tightened. Crosswind. She felt the word before she processed it. Around her, murmurs started cautious, excited, confused. Rachel leaned closer. Did he just say crosswind? Claire nodded, eyes fixed on Charles. Yes, Charles continued, pushing through the tension. Effective immediately. We'll be under the crosswind management structure. There'll be operational changes, new protocols, and likely some reorganization. The executive team will be here Monday for introductions. He paused, his gaze flicking over the room. And before you ask, yes, the new CEO will attend personally. The sentence hung there. Someone near the back whispered, Nathaniel Cross himself. Another voice answered, That's what it sounds like. Claire's breath caught. It was subtle, invisible to anyone watching, but her hand tightened around her coffee cup until the lid creaked. Charles went on about transition procedures, HR updates, and policy changes, but his words blurred into static. Her mind had gone somewhere else, to the marble floor, the shattering glass, the cold weight of his voice. Do not touch me. She blinked once, grounding herself in the moment. Around her, people were already speculating. Maybe bonuses crosswinds got deep pockets. I heard they're ruthless, Rachel whispered. You okay? I'm fine, Claire said automatically. The words tasted like metal. She wasn't fine. Her thoughts twisted in quiet panic. Of all the companies in the city, of all the possible mergers, it had to be his. The man she'd humiliated in front of half the elite class now owned her livelihood. The meeting ended, chairs scraping, voices rising, people clustered in small groups, buzzing with curiosity and caffeine. Charles spoke to HR near the door, avoiding Claire's eyes again. She slipped away to her desk, the noise fading behind her. Her hands shook as she set the coffee down. She stared at the monitor until the reflection of her own face steadied her. She straightened her posture, forced her breath to slow. You survived worse, she told herself. You can survive this too. But the tremor beneath that thought betrayed her. At lunch, the office cafeteria was alive with rumor. Screens flashed with business headlines. Crosswind expands regional portfolio. Nathaniel Cross acquires Bennett and more. His name gleamed on every digital ticker like it had been waiting for her. Rachel pushed a tray toward her. So, Monday, she said. You think he'll remember you? Claire's fork paused midair. I doubt it, she lied. Rachel studied her for a second. You're not easy to forget. Claire. Claire gave a small laugh. Let's hope this time I am. They ate quietly after that. The hum of conversation swelled and faded. When Claire stood to leave, Rachel squeezed her wrist lightly. Whatever happens, don't let him see you flinch. Back at her desk, she threw herself into work. Reports, schedules, budgets, anything that filled the silence. Her movements became mechanical, precise. She kept her head down, her tone neutral, her presence invisible. But the memory of that night kept pressing against her ribs like an old bruise that refused to fade. By late afternoon, Charles called her into his office. I know this might be uncomfortable, he said, voice lower than usual, but I need you focused. Bennett, these next few weeks will be intense. Crosswind's reputation for restructuring is efficient. I understand, she said. He nodded. Good. You've rebuilt a lot of trust since the gala. Don't lose it now. When she left, her hands were cold. The hallway lights flickered faintly, the hum of air conditioning the only sound. She sat back at her desk, glancing toward the window. Outside, the city glowed under an overcast sky. Somewhere out there, Nathaniel Cross was likely preparing his notes for the acquisition rollout, unaware, or maybe not, of the quiet storm he'd reignited in this office. As the clock crept past 6, most people filed out, their laughter echoing faintly in the hallway. Claire stayed. She preferred the quiet, the solitude that came after hours. It gave her time to think without having to pretend. She opened a document, updated a spreadsheet, then stopped. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She imagined Monday morning the doors opening, his footsteps on the same marble she walked every day. She pictured his face, calm, detached, maybe unreadable. Her chest tightened again. Would he remember her name, or just the moment she ruined his suit? She leaned back, exhaling. "You're not that same woman," she whispered. "You're stronger now. Still, a small part of her. The one that remembered the sting of humiliation trembled quietly beneath the surface." She packed her bag, turned off her monitor, and walked to the window one last time. The city stretched below, lights flickering like restless thoughts. For months, she'd fought to rebuild herself piece by piece. Now, fate was bringing her back to the very man who had seen her at her weakest. Maybe that was the point to see if she could stand taller this time. As she reached for her coat, her phone buzzed with a company-wide message. "Welcome the Crosswind team this Monday. Mr. Nathaniel Cross will be joining for the formal introduction at 9 a.m." Her breath hitched. The message glowed on the screen like a quiet dare. She locked her phone, slipped it into her bag, and turned off the lights. The room fell into shadow. Outside, the wind rose, brushing against the glass. Claire stood for a moment, listening to the sound, steady, relentless. Monday would come, and with it, him. She wasn't sure what would happen when their eyes met again, only that the air would shift just like it had the first time. Monday arrived with the kind of silence that comes before a storm. The office smelled faintly of fresh polish and nervous anticipation. Claire arrived early, before the others, the air still cool from the morning air conditioning. She set her bag down, arranged her desk, and took a long breath that didn't quite reach the bottom of her lungs. Every motion was deliberate, her pen lined parallel to her notepad, her hair smoothed neatly back, her blazer pressed sharp at the shoulders. If composure had a shape, she wore it. By 8:30, the floor buzzed with low voices. Someone adjusted their tie, someone else straightened flowers in the lobby. Even the coffee machine seemed to hum with restraint. The words "crosswind hospitality" whispered from cubicle to cubicle like a spell, half excitement, half fear. Claire checked the clock, 8:59. Her pulse counted each second. At 9, the elevator doors opened. Nathaniel Cross stepped out. He looked exactly as she remembered, maybe sharper, maybe quieter. The gray suit fit him like it had been built around his frame, his tie a precise shade between steel and smoke. His gaze swept the room once, not hurried, not indulgent, just deliberate. People straightened instinctively as he passed, drawn by that unspoken gravity. Claire's heart stuttered. For a moment, she thought he wouldn't notice her. Then his eyes met hers. A flicker, recognition. Faint but certain. It passed so quickly she might have imagined it. Charles hurried forward, voice bright and too fast. "Mr. Cross, welcome. We're honored to have you here." Nathaniel nodded once. "Thank you. I've been looking forward to seeing how Bennett and Moore operates." His voice was calm, deep, carrying the kind of confidence that filled a room without raising volume. He moved through the introductions, smoothly department heads, project leads, handshakes and practiced smiles. Claire stood near the back, clipboard in hand, ready to blend into the wall if she could. But when Charles gestured vaguely toward her section, Nathaniel's eyes found her again. "Ms. Bennett," he said. The sound of her name on his tongue froze her mid-breath. He shouldn't have remembered it. She stepped forward, posture steady. "Good morning, Mr. Cross. Welcome to Bennett and Moore." His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his gaze. Curiosity, maybe surprise. "Thank you." A pause. "It's good to see competence still lives here." Charles laughed too quickly, misunderstanding the tone. "Oh, Claire's one of our best." Nathaniel's eyes lingered a fraction longer than polite. Then he turned back to the group. "I'm sure she is." The meeting continued numbers, projections, plans. Claire took notes without missing a beat, though her pulse was anything but steady. Every time his voice cut through the room, her focus wavered. Not because of him exactly, but because of what he represented the night, the humiliation, the distance she'd worked so hard to climb out of. When it ended, people crowded around him, eager to shake hands, to impress. Claire stayed at her desk, pretending to organize her notes. She thought she'd escaped notice until a shadow crossed her workspace. Ms. Bennett? Her head lifted slowly. Nathaniel stood a few feet away, close enough for her to see the faint sheen of his cufflink, the restrained calm of his posture. Mr. Cross, she said evenly. I remember the night, he said simply. No cruelty, no smirk, just fact. Her throat tightened. So do I. Silence stretched between them, fragile as glass. Around them, the office hummed with nervous energy, but their small pocket of space felt still. Nathaniel studied her for a beat longer, as though measuring something invisible. You've continued working here. Yes. Her tone stayed steady. I do my job well. His mouth curved, not quite a smile. I can see that. Something about his calm unnerved her more than anger would have. She waited, hands folded, spine straight. He adjusted his sleeve, eyes still on her. People make mistakes. Ms. Bennett. What matters is what they do afterward. She met his gaze, steady now. Then I hope what I've done since speaks for itself. For a moment, neither moved. The air between them held a quiet tension, not hostility, but history. Then he nodded slightly. We'll see. He turned to leave, then paused. Report to my office tomorrow morning. Her breath caught. Tomorrow, 8 sharp. His tone left no room for question. There's something I'd like to discuss. And just like that, he was gone. Claire stood motionless, her heart knocking hard against her ribs. Rachel appeared a moment later, whispering, Did he just... Yes. Oh my God. Claire. What does that even mean, I don't know, she said softly, still staring at the spot where he'd stood. But I guess I'll find out. When the crowd dispersed, she sat back down, hands trembling only slightly. The hum of the office returned printers, voices, the ordinary rhythm of work. But inside her, everything felt suspended. She stared at her reflection faintly visible in the black of her monitor. The woman who looked back wasn't the same one who had spilled champagne under chandeliers. She'd changed, hardened in quiet ways. Still, the thought of walking into his office again stirred something deep, a blend of dread and something she couldn't quite name. The clock ticked softly on the wall. Outside, the sky was pale, almost colorless. Somewhere far below, traffic moved through wet streets, steady and relentless. Claire exhaled, long and slow. Her voice was barely a whisper. Whatever this is, I'll face it. And yet, beneath that resolve, the smallest tremor remained a ripple of fate returning to her door. Tomorrow, at 8 sharp, the story she thought she'd escaped was about to begin again. The next morning arrived too soon. Claire barely slept, her thoughts looping like quiet footsteps in a long corridor. By 7:30, she was already in the elevator, watching her reflection tremble slightly in the mirrored doors. The coffee in her hand had gone cold, untouched. She felt the familiar calm she'd built over years of work, a calm made of habit, not peace. Nathaniel Cross's office sat at the far end of the executive floor, framed by glass and light. The doors were open when she arrived. His assistant, a man in a navy suit with a voice as crisp as paper, gestured her in. Mr. Cross is expecting you. She stepped inside. The room was large but uncluttered, all glass and steel in soft gray tones. The view beyond the windows stretched across the bay, pale sunlight cutting through a thin morning mist. Nathaniel stood by the window, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a pen he wasn't using. Ms. Bennett. He turned slightly, his tone even polite. Please, sit. She obeyed, setting her coffee down carefully on the edge of his desk, Her hands found each other in her lap. He watched her for a moment, expression unreadable. Then he said, "I'll be direct." Her heartbeat quickened. "I need a new executive assistant, someone who understands discretion, precision," and he paused people. His gaze didn't waver. "I'd like that person to be you," for a heartbeat. She didn't understand what he'd said. "Me? Yes." Her throat tightened. "Mr. Cross." With all due respect, he raised a hand slightly. "You're going to say it's inappropriate, that the history between us makes it impossible." She stayed silent. He continued. "But I've reviewed your work, your record, your coordination, the way you manage chaos quietly. It's rare." "Still," she said softly, "you could have anyone you want for that job." His tone didn't change. "I don't want anyone. I want someone who understands both excellence and failure. You've lived both. That gives you perspective." The words stung and soothed at the same time. She drew a slow breath. "You think my humiliation is a qualification?" He met her eyes, then not cold this time, but sharp in a different way. "I think how you carried yourself after it is." Silence filled the space again. The hum of the air conditioner, the faint ticking of a clock. Claire's hands tightened around each other. "I appreciate the offer," she said finally, "but I don't know if it's wise." "Wise?" His tone softened. "Perhaps not, but worthwhile." She shook her head slightly. "People will talk. They already do," he said simply. "That's their hobby, not mine." She almost smiled, despite herself. But then the other feeling crept in: pride, bruised and still tender. "You don't need to give me a second chance, Mr. Cross." He regarded her quietly. "I'm not giving you anything, Ms. Bennett. I'm asking for your skill. You've earned that." His voice was steady, unflinching. Not pity, not power. Something else. Claire looked down, tracing the edge of her notebook with her thumb. "You really think this would work? I do," he said. "Because I don't choose people by comfort. I choose them by capability. And you have it?" She let out a slow breath. Eyes on the window now. The city below looked small, fragile, caught in morning haze. Somewhere inside. The memory of the gala flickered, the spill, the laughter, his voice cutting through her like glass. And yet, here he was, calm, deliberate, asking her to stand beside him, not beneath. "What if I say no?" she asked quietly. "Then I'll respect that." His gaze didn't waver. "But I think you'd regret it." Her lips parted, a faint exhale of disbelief. "You sound awfully sure of yourself." He smiled, not wide, but real. Confidence and arrogance often share a border. "Ms. Bennett." "I try to stay on the right side." She didn't answer. For a long moment, she just looked at him, the man who had once humiliated her without raising his voice, and who now offered her a place in his orbit again. It wasn't forgiveness, it was opportunity. But opportunity always carried a price. "I need a moment to think," she said finally. "Take all the moments you need," he replied, returning his gaze to the city beyond the glass. She stood, smoothed her skirt, and nodded politely. "Thank you for considering me." When she reached the door, he spoke again, his tone softer. "Ms. Bennett?" She turned. He met her eyes steady, deliberate. "You understand people better than most. That's rare. Don't let fear make you smaller than that." Something in her chest shifted, like a knot loosening. She nodded once, unable to find words. Then she left. The elevator doors closed around her, sealing the silence. Her reflection stared back, pale but resolute. In the quiet hum of descent, her thoughts tangled pride and doubt, anger, and something dangerously close to hope. Back at her desk, Rachel was waiting, curiosity burning in her eyes. "Well," Claire sat down slowly. "He offered me a job." What kind of job? His assistant. Rachel blinked. His assistant. As in Nathaniel Cross. The one you... Yes. Claire. That's... Wow. What did you say I said I'd think about it? Rachel leaned in. So Claire looked at her coffee, still warm from the morning. The steam rose in soft curls. I think I already know. Rachel smiled knowingly. You're going to do it, aren't you? Claire met her gaze, the corner of her mouth curving just slightly. If fate wants a rematch, she said quietly, I'll give it one. Rachel laughed softly. That's my girl. Claire turned back to her screen, her pulse steadying. The fear was still there. It always would be, but beneath it, something else stirred purpose, fragile but growing. Outside, the bay glimmered under a thin veil of light. The world kept moving, and for the first time in a long while, she wanted to move with it. Tomorrow would be the beginning of something neither of them could predict. And somewhere deep down, she already knew this time, she would not be the one who broke. The first Monday came before the sun. Claire was already awake at 5, coffee brewing while the city still held its breath. Her new badge hung by the door, the name printed under the Crosswind logo. It felt heavier than it should have. She tied her hair, smoothed her blazer, and whispered to the quiet apartment, Let's begin. By 7, she was in the office. Nathaniel's office arranging folders, checking his flight itinerary, reviewing a stack of contracts with colored tabs. The schedule stretched like a marathon meetings, calls, travel. Her new role wasn't built for hesitation. The first week blurred into motion. She learned the rhythm quickly, the short, precise stride of his steps, the way he liked reports printed on heavy paper, not emailed, the silence before he made a decision, the calm that followed. Nathaniel didn't explain much. He didn't have to. His world moved fast, and she learned by watching. By day 3, she could anticipate what he'd ask before he said it, a quiet efficiency that didn't go unnoticed. You read people well, he said once, barely looking up from his screen. That's useful. Claire smiled faintly. I try. You succeed, he replied, then went back to typing. That was his way, brief, measured, never careless. He wasn't warm, not yet, but he wasn't cruel either. And that difference mattered. The days blurred into early mornings and late nights. Flights to Chicago, San Diego, Seattle. Hotels with polished floors and the same white sheets. Her notebook filled with notes written in her tidy script times. Figures, reminders that kept everything from collapsing. She moved through each day like a thread holding fabric together. Nathaniel traveled beside her, composed even at 3 a.m. in airport lounges. He spoke little, but when he did, his words carried weight. Once, as they waited for a delayed flight, she caught him studying her schedule notes. You changed my meeting order, he said. You had a call with Tokyo right after, she answered. I thought you'd want time to reset. He nodded slowly, as if unused to being anticipated. Efficient. A small silence stretched between them. The hum of the airport, the soft clink of a barista's cups. Then, unexpectedly, he said, You ever get tired of being the one who fixes everything? She looked at him, surprised. Doesn't everyone need someone to fix things? Maybe, he said, glancing out the window at the rain streaking across glass. But some people never stop long enough to ask who fixes you. She didn't know what to say. The announcement broke the silence. Boarding time. They stood, gathering their things. But his words lingered longer than she expected. Over the next weeks, they built a rhythm. She adjusted to his pace, the long hours, the quiet discipline. When he worked, she worked. When he skipped lunch, she reminded him. He started taking the reminders. Late one night, after a 12-hour day, they sat in his office under the dim glow of city lights. Paperwork sprawled across the desk. She handed him a cup of coffee. You take it black, she said. He looked at the cup, then at her. You remember that? Hard to forget when you refuse sugar at 2 in the morning? He chuckled, a small, rare sound that softened his whole face. Touché? For a moment, the distance between them felt thinner, not gone, but thinner. Still, neither crossed it. Work filled the space where personal words might have lived, but the quiet began to feel less heavy. It wasn't warmth exactly, more like respect beginning to take root. He started asking for her opinion in meetings. "What do you think, Ms. Bennett?" The first time he did, her voice almost caught. She answered carefully, measured but sure. Afterward, he simply nodded, noted. She left the room the day with something new in her chest. Not pride, not yet, but a fragile sense of belonging. One night, after a late dinner meeting, they walked out of a downtown hotel. The streets shimmered with rain. Nathaniel's driver waited by the curb. Claire hesitated. "Good night, Mr. Cross." He paused before stepping into the car. "You've stopped flinching when people say my name." She blinked. "Should I still be no?" He said, "But I noticed. But I..." Then he got in the car and left her standing under the streetlight, rain catching in her hair. The next morning, she found a single sticky note on her desk in his handwriting. "Excellent work yesterday. NC." It was small, but it carried more weight than most praise she'd ever received. Weeks passed. The world narrowed to flights and deadlines. Yet, within that blur, small human moments kept breaking through. A shared joke about jet lag. The way he held the door for her without thinking. The quiet acknowledgement when she handled a crisis before it reached him. Sometimes, in the rare quiet between meetings, she caught him looking at her, not the way a boss studies an employee, but as if he were trying to understand something about her he couldn't quite name. She didn't look away, not anymore, but the line stayed drawn, unspoken and necessary. Respect lived between them, delicate, almost like truce. Then came Friday. The last meeting ended late. The office had emptied, city lights glowing through the windows. Nathaniel closed his laptop, loosened his tie, and leaned back in his chair. "You've adapted quickly," he said. Claire smiled faintly. "I learn fast." "You do?" He agreed. A pause. "I trust you've kept your passport ready?" She frowned slightly. "Why?" He looked at her then, eyes steady, calm as ever, but carrying something new. "Paris," he said. "We leave tomorrow." Her breath caught. "Tomorrow. 10, flight. You'll have the details in an hour." She nodded slowly, masking the flicker of surprise. "Understood." Nathaniel rose, gathering his things. "Get some rest tonight, Ms. Bennett. We have a long week ahead." When he left, the office felt larger somehow, emptier. Claire stood by the window, looking out over the city, Paris. The word lingered like perfume, soft and impossible. She touched the edge of her desk, grounding herself. Her reflection in the glass looked steadier than it once did, stronger. Her heart, though, betrayed her calm. It beat just a little faster. "Paris," she whispered. "All right then." Outside, the wind carried the faint hum of the city, alive and moving. Somewhere in that sound, she heard the whisper of fate, quiet, patient, waiting for what came next. Spring sunlight spilled across the cobblestones of Rue Saint-Honoré, gold and soft as a sigh. Claire stood at the hotel window that first morning, coffee in hand, watching Paris wake. The air outside shimmered faintly, the smell of bread, faint music from a street violin, a woman laughing somewhere below. For a moment she forgot about work, deadlines, expectations. The city felt alive in a way she hadn't in years. Behind her, Nathaniel's voice cut through the quiet. "We leave in 20 minutes." She turned, grounding herself. "Everything's prepared. Presentation, contracts, local partners confirmed." He nodded once, adjusting his cufflinks. The morning light touched his face, softening the usual sharpness. "Good. You make it look easy." "It's not," she said, smiling faintly. He looked at her, an unreadable pause before he added, "No, I imagine it isn't." The Paris project was demanding long hours in glass offices overlooking the Seine, endless meetings, and the hum of languages that made everything feel distant yet intimate. Claire moved through each day with quiet grace, her voice measured, her notes precise. Nathaniel trusted her completely now. She could feel it in the way he spoke, the way he listened when she offered solutions. Still, there were moments brief, almost invisible, where something deeper hummed beneath the professionalism. One afternoon, as they crossed the Pont Neuf after a client dinner, he slowed beside her. The air smelled of rain and perfume. "You've changed," he said. She glanced at him. "How so? You used to carry your mistakes like armor. Now you carry them like memory." She looked out over the river. "Maybe both." He smiled slightly. "Memory is lighter." The words lingered, quiet as the rippling water below. Days bled into evenings filled with papers and soft music from the cafe next door. She'd work beside him in silence, the glow from his laptop reflecting in the glass windows. Once, near midnight, he brought her a cup of coffee without a word. She accepted it, their fingers brushing briefly. The touch was accidental, simple, yet her pulse stumbled. Nathaniel looked down at his hand, then back at her. "You're trembling," he said softly. "Too much caffeine." She lied. He didn't press, but he didn't look away, either. A few nights later, after another 12-hour day, he suggested dinner outside the hotel. "We've earned a meal that doesn't come with spreadsheets," he said. She hesitated. "Dinner or debriefing?" His eyes warmed with amusement. "Both, if you like." They walked to a small restaurant tucked behind a narrow street. The walls were lined with wine bottles and the tables close enough for quiet voices. The candle between them flickered gently, the light catching on his watch. Conversation came easier than either expected. They spoke first of work negotiations, travel, the chaos of corporate life. Then, slowly, it drifted elsewhere. He told her about his father, the weight of a family empire, the constant expectation to be more, to never rest. He used to say, "If you stop moving, someone passes you." I believed him for too long. She listened, her gaze soft. "That sounds lonely." "It is," he admitted, "but it makes you sharp, until it doesn't." Claire traced the rim of her glass. "And now I'm learning the difference between control and connection," he said quietly. Her breath caught. "That's a fine line." "Yes," he said, eyes steady on hers, "but worth walking." Silence held them for a moment, not uncomfortable, just full. The candle flickered again, light bending through the glass like memory. When they left, the city had quieted. The sky was pale blue, the air cool with a hint of rain. They walked along the Seine, footsteps soft against the stone. Nathaniel stopped near Pont Alexandre III. The grand bridge arched in gold. Lights shimmered on the water, reflecting like liquid fire. Claire leaned on the rail, the breeze brushing her hair across her face. He watched her for a long time, something shifting in his expression, no longer the CEO, no longer the man guarded by power. "You know," he said quietly, "I thought success would fix the emptiness." She turned toward him. "And did it?" He shook his head slowly. "It only made it quieter." Her voice softened. "Then maybe it's not something to fix." He looked at her, really looked, as though seeing something he hadn't before. "What then?" "Maybe you just let someone in." For a moment, neither moved. Then his hand reached for hers, tentative, deliberate. She didn't pull away. Their fingers interlaced like it was something they'd done before, something remembered instead of new. Her heart beat faster, but she didn't hide it. The air around them seemed to slow. Nathaniel's thumb brushed lightly across her hand. "You've been patient with me," he said quietly. "You didn't need patience," she replied. "You needed to be seen." His breath caught, a quiet laugh, soft, disbelieving. "You make everything sound simple. It's not," she said. "But it could be." He stepped closer. Just a fraction. Just enough for the world to fade until only the sound of the river remained. When his hand reached her face, it wasn't hurried, it was reverent, careful, as though asking permission she'd already given. She met his gaze, steady and sure. And when he kissed her, it wasn't the way people imagine powerful men kiss. It wasn't about possession or victory. It was soft, real. The kind that felt like release. The bridge lights glowed above them, the gold reflections trembling on the dark water. Paris moved quietly around them, a car passing, laughter in the distance, the faint chime of a bicycle bell. When they finally pulled apart, neither spoke for a moment. The silence was full enough. Then Nathaniel whispered, "This was never about power." Claire smiled faintly, her voice barely above the sound of the river. "No, it never was." He exhaled, eyes searching hers. "Then what was it?" She looked back toward the lights, the bridge, the shimmer of life around them. "Connection," she said softly. "Something we both forgot we needed." The word lingered in the air like warmth. For a long time, they stood there, two people who had spent years building walls, now quietly standing on the edge of something vast, uncertain, and beautifully human. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain and the faint sweetness of spring blossoms. Claire leaned her head lightly against his shoulder. He didn't move, didn't speak. In that stillness, beneath the golden arches of the bridge, everything felt possible again. And for the first time, she wasn't afraid of what might come next. Morning sunlight poured through the thin curtains of the Paris hotel room, soft and golden, catching in the folds of Claire's hair as she stood by the window. Below, the city was waking clinking dishes, a motorbike starting, the faint hum of life returning to rhythm. She wrapped her hands around a cup of coffee, letting the warmth ground her. Behind her, Nathaniel stirred. They hadn't spoken much after last night. The kiss had changed something quietly, irrevocably, but neither of them had named it yet. "Coffee?" she asked, her voice light, cautious. He sat up, the sheet falling slightly, his eyes meeting hers. "Please." She handed him the cup. Their fingers brushed again, familiar now, but still electric. For a while, they just drank in silence, listening to the faint sound of Paris breathing outside. Then, Nathaniel said softly, "Claire." Something in his tone made her turn fully. He wasn't the executive now, not the man of meetings and boardrooms. There was something stripped away. Bare. "I owe you an apology," he said. She froze. "For what?" He held her gaze. "You know for what. That night, the gala." She looked away, her throat tightening. "That was years ago. It was last year. To me, it feels longer," she said. He set the cup down on the bedside table. "I've thought about it more times than I care to admit. The way I spoke to you, the way I looked at you. I was angry not at you, at myself. But you paid for it." She stayed quiet, staring at the window. Outside, a bird landed on the railing, shook off the morning chill, and flew away again. Nathaniel continued, his voice low. "That night, I saw something in you I didn't expect. Dignity. Even when everyone was watching. I've never forgotten that. Or the way I made you feel small when you didn't deserve it." Her breath trembled. "You humiliated me in front of everyone. I know. And you didn't even look back." "I couldn't," he said softly. Looking back would have meant seeing what I'd done. The honesty in his voice disarmed her. She turned toward him slowly. His expression was quiet but raw, the kind of vulnerability that doesn't come from guilt alone, but from regret that's lived too long inside someone. "Why now?" she asked. "Why tell me this here? After all this time?" "Because it mattered," he said. "You mattered. And I didn't want you to think power was the only thing I had to offer the world." The words landed deep. For a moment, she couldn't speak. The space between them filled with everything unsaid, the pain, the history, the strange tenderness that had grown in its place. "Finally," she said. "I forgive you." Nathaniel exhaled slowly, as if the air itself had been waiting. "But," she added, "forgiveness isn't forgetting." He nodded. "I wouldn't want you to." Her lips curved faintly. "Good. Then we understand each other?" A small silence followed, lighter this time, the kind that didn't hurt to hold. He smiled a real, unguarded smile that reached his eyes. "You're remarkable. You know that." She gave a quiet laugh. "I've been called worse." He chuckled too, the sound soft, disbelieving. "I don't doubt it." The tension that had held them apart began to dissolve, replaced by something gentler. They spent the morning like that, sharing coffee, trading stories that had nothing to do with work. She told him about her mother's garden back home, how the lilacs always bloomed late. He told her about sneaking into jazz clubs as a teenager, how the music made him feel less alone. At some point, they were both laughing, really laughing, and for the first time, it didn't feel like two worlds trying to meet halfway. It felt like one small world finally making sense. Later, they walked along the Seine again. The air carried a sweetness that only spring can hold, the faint scent of pastries, of rain that never quite fell. Nathaniel kept his hands in his pockets, his shoulder brushing hers now and then. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if that night had gone differently?" she asked quietly. He thought for a moment. "All the time. And maybe we never would have met again," he said. "Maybe we'd still be strangers, and I'd still be that man who thought control was strength." She smiled gently. "And now, he said, looking at her, "I think strength looks a lot like grace." The simplicity of the moment disarmed her. The world around them, the voices, the breeze, the echo of footsteps all seemed to fade until there was only this, the quiet certainty between them. When they reached the bridge again, the light had turned golden. Paris shimmered like a dream she didn't want to wake from. Nathaniel stopped, leaning on the railing beside her. "You make me laugh," he said, almost to himself. "I'd forgotten how that feels." "Then you're welcome," she said softly. He turned to her, his voice low. "You've given me more than that. Claire?" Her heart skipped. "Have I?" "Yes." His gaze lingered. "You've given me back my humanity." The words caught her completely off guard. She blinked, unsure what to do with them. Then she smiled, small, quiet, real. "I think you had it all along," she said. "You just stopped looking." He exhaled, a sound that was half laughter, half relief. "You're impossible to argue with. That's probably true." They both laughed again, and the sound mixed with the rhythm of the city. The moment was fragile, soft, human, fleeting. But for now, it was enough. Later, when they returned to the hotel, she sat by the window again, looking out over the rooftops. Nathaniel was on a call in the next room, his voice distant but steady. The sunlight had begun to fade, dipping the city in amber. She thought about everything the night that started it all. The apology. The forgiveness that wasn't perfect but real. For the first time in a long while, she felt peace. Not the loud kind that demands celebration, but the quiet kind that feels like exhaling after years of holding your breath. She leaned her head against the window, eyes half closed, and let the hum of the city cradle her. She didn't know what came next, but tonight, in this small moment of stillness, she wasn't afraid. And somewhere deep down, though she couldn't name it yet, the air was beginning to shift again softly, like a storm gathering far beyond the horizon. The morning broke with the sound of rain, soft at first, then steadier, falling against the tall windows of the Crosswind headquarters. Claire was early, as always. She liked the quiet before the building filled with voices and footsteps. But that morning, the quiet didn't feel calm. Something in the air had changed thin, restless. Her phone buzzed once, then again, then wouldn't stop. She reached for it. A message from Rachel. "Claire, don't open the news." "Not yet." Her stomach turned. She opened it anyway. The headline glared back from the screen: Crosswind CEO and assistant caught in Paris affair. Below, the photos, her hand in Nathaniel's, their faces softened by candlelight. A kiss not under the Pont Alexandre bridge, but close enough for someone's camera. Her breath caught. It didn't feel real at first. The images looked like strangers, two people caught in a private moment made public. But it was her. It was him. It was everything she thought belonged only to them. The rain outside deepened, heavy against the glass. In the hallway beyond her office door, voices began to rise, murmurs. The unmistakable rhythm of gossip, low, careful, cruel. Her screen lit up again, a new headline: Corporate Scandal or Love Story. Inside Nathaniel Cross's secret relationship with his assistant. Claire's fingers went cold. She set the phone down, but her reflection in the dark screen stared back at her, pale and small. The door opened without a knock. Charles stood there, rain on his coat, expression tight. The board's meeting in an hour. Nathaniel's with legal now. She started, but he cut her off. You need to leave the office. Claire, now. Her chest tightened. Are they suspending you? Pending review? He didn't meet her eyes. I'm sorry. For a moment, everything slowed: the sound of the rain, the hum of fluorescent lights, the ache rising in her throat. Then she nodded. I understand. She gathered her things quietly, her movement steady though her hands shook. People turned away as she walked through the corridor. Some whispered. Others stared outright. Rachel met her near the elevator, eyes wide with worry. Claire. It's fine, Claire said softly. I'll call you later. But it wasn't fine, not even close. Outside, the city was a blur of gray. Cameras had already gathered by the crosswind entrance. She kept her head down, pushed through the crowd. Someone shouted her name. Another voice asked if she was the other woman. A camera flash went off inches from her face. She didn't answer. She just walked through puddles, through noise, through shame that wasn't hers, but clung to her anyway. By the time she reached her apartment, her clothes were soaked, her hair plastered to her skin. She dropped her bag and stood there in the dim light, breathing hard. The silence that followed was unbearable. Her phone vibrated again. Notifications, mentions, messages, words she didn't want to read. She turned it face down on the counter, then slid to the floor. The weight of everything, the humiliation, the betrayal of privacy, the noise of strangers deciding her worth came crashing down all at once. Her hands covered her face. The tears came quietly at first, then harder, until her breath broke between them. Images of that night in Paris played through her mind, the light on the bridge, his hand in hers, his voice whispering connection. It had felt honest. It was honest. But now, that honesty had been twisted into scandal. For hours. She stayed there on the kitchen floor, the city moving outside her window as if her world hadn't just fallen apart again. When the tears stopped, what was left wasn't calm, it was emptiness. Her phone buzzed again. This time, a text from Nathaniel. I'm handling it. Don't say anything to the press. I'll fix this. She stared at the words, then turned the phone off. Fix this. As if everything could be undone by strategy, by PR, by power. As if this was another business deal. She got up slowly, her limbs heavy. In the mirror across the room, she caught her reflection, the same face from the photos, only stripped of light now. Her voice, when it came, was barely a whisper. They can twist what they want. They can destroy my name. She paused, the sentence hanging like smoke, but not who I've become. The room stayed still for a long moment. Rain tapped the window like a heartbeat. In the corner of her apartment, her shoes still sat where she'd left them that morning, clean, polished, prepared for another day of work. Now they looked out of place, like relics from another life. She walked to the couch and wrapped herself in a blanket, shivering not from cold, but from the ache of everything collapsing again: her career, her peace, the fragile trust she'd begun to rebuild. Her eyes drifted toward the ceiling. The faint hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. She thought of her mother's voice, the one that used to guide her through storms like this. Hard work is your dignity, honey. Maybe dignity wasn't about holding your head high when the world applauded. Maybe it was about standing at all when it tried to tear you down. She didn't sleep that night. The city outside was too loud. Headlines kept spinning online, feeding the frenzy. Images of her face appeared on every site. Speculation, outrage, judgment. But somewhere between exhaustion and defiance, a thought began to take root. They could drag her name through the mud. They could rewrite her story with lies and headlines. But they couldn't take her truth. When dawn broke, soft and pale against her window, she stood up, washed her face, and whispered to the reflection that still looked like her. Despite everything, "You're not done yet." Her voice was quiet, steady. Outside, the city kept moving, as if daring her to rise again, and deep down, under the noise and the heartbreak, she knew she would. The rain hadn't stopped since morning. It came steady and fine, blurring the skyline outside Crosswind Tower into soft gray shapes. Inside the boardroom, the air was sharp with tension. Nathaniel stood at the end of the long table, hands braced against the polished wood, as 12 pairs of eyes studied him like a man on trial. Across the table, the chairman cleared his throat. "This company's reputation has taken a hit. Nathaniel, the shareholders want answers. The board wants reassurance. We can't afford scandal, not at this level." Nathaniel said nothing. Another voice, colder. "Your relationship with Ms. Bennett has created exposure we can't manage. The only way forward is separation both personally and professionally." He looked up slowly. "You're asking me to fire her, to suspend her permanently," someone corrected, "and issue a formal statement distancing the company from whatever this was?" Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "You're asking me to lie. We're asking you to choose." The words landed like a slap. He straightened, the room spinning faintly with the weight of it. They all stared, waiting for his answer. After a long silence, he said quietly, "I need time." "You don't have time," the chairman said. "The press is circling. Every hour costs us credibility." Nathaniel's voice dropped. "Then you'll have your statement tomorrow." When he left the room, the rain followed him down the hall in streaks across the glass walls. His reflection looked like a stranger, the controlled, immaculate man who had built an empire on certainty, now unsure of everything that mattered. In his office, the phone blinked with missed calls, messages from legal, PR, his father. He ignored them all. He picked up a pen instead, his hand hovering over a blank sheet of paper. He tried to write, "Claire." It began, then stopped. He sat back, closing his eyes. The rain was louder now, tapping the windows like memory. He could almost hear her voice, soft, calm, unyielding. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. He'd broken something again, this time not out of cruelty, but out of cowardice. Across town, Claire sat in her apartment, lights off, the room dim with the pale wash of stormlight. She hadn't heard from him all day. Not since the text, "I'll fix this." She'd turned her phone off after that. She couldn't bear to see what the world had turned them into, but silence was its own punishment. She sat by the window, watching the city blur beneath the rain. Somewhere down there, he was fighting for his place in the world, and she was paying for it with hers. Her fingers traced the rim of her coffee mug, cold now. The loneliness pressed in tight. Part of her wanted to call him, to tell him she didn't need him to fix anything, that all she ever wanted was truth. But pride kept her still, the same pride that had kept her standing the night she spilled champagne on his perfect suit. She whispered to the glass, "Don't make me small again." The next morning, the statement went public. She didn't need to read it to know. Rachel sent her the headline anyway. Crosswind denies relationship rumors. Assistant dismissed amid investigation. Dismissed. The word hit harder than she expected. For hours she stared at her ceiling. the sound of rain seeping through the cracks of her thoughts. Then she stood, quietly packed her things into a small suitcase, not out of escape, but survival. Nathaniel tried to call that evening, once, twice, then a third time. Each went unanswered. He left a voicemail he didn't even remember finishing. He wrote again, "Claire, please, let me explain." The words sat unsent in his drafts folder, the cursor blinking like a heartbeat. Days turned into weeks. He worked, but not really. The board smiled again. The headlines began to fade, but the silence in his office grew heavier. The chair across from his desk stayed empty. The coffee stayed cold. Sometimes, late at night, he'd find himself standing by the window, watching rain gather on the glass. The same sound from that night, the night everything began. He thought of her voice, the way she'd said his name softly, without judgment. He thought of her laughter in Paris, her forgiveness, her grace. And for the first time, the empire around him felt meaningless. Claire, too, carried the weight of absence. She found small work in a quiet corner cafe, the kind of job that asked nothing from her but presence. It was enough. The smell of espresso, the hum of conversation, the sound of spoons against porcelain, it gave her back the rhythm of ordinary life. Sometimes customers recognized her, a pause, a flicker of awareness, then sympathy. She smiled through it all. She'd learned how to survive eyes, but at night, when the cafe closed and the city dimmed, she let herself think of him, the man who had stood by her in Paris, who had said connection like it was a vow. She missed him, though she didn't want to. The missing came quiet, patient, like rain that never really stopped. One evening, she opened her old laptop, there, in her drafts folder, a message she'd written weeks ago. "Nathaniel, I don't hate you, but I can't be someone you save after you've already chosen to lose me." She read it twice, her finger hovering over send. Then she closed the laptop. Some things were meant to stay unsent. In the city above, the storm broke again, hard rain, steady wind, the same kind that had fallen the night of the gala. The sound filled every corner of her apartment. She stood by the window, pressing her palm to the glass. Somewhere, she imagined him doing the same, looking out into the same storm, both of them tracing the same memory from opposite sides of the world. The rain carried their silence between rooftops and streets, between regret and resilience. It was strange, she thought, how love could make you feel both full and hollow at once. She closed her eyes, the thunder rolling far away. Nathaniel sat in his office, the city lights flickering like ghosts against the storm. A single paper lay on his desk, his letter of resignation. He hadn't signed it yet, but he would. The phone buzzed again, a message from an unknown number. He didn't open it, he just sat there, listening to the rain, the echo of her voice in his head. Both of them alone, both missing what they'd found too late, outside. The rain kept falling, soft, relentless, familiar, like the first night. Morning came gray and cold, the kind of light that carries both exhaustion and resolve. Claire stood before the mirror in a dark blazer, her hair pulled back neatly. There was no makeup to hide behind this time, only her eyes steady, clear, determined. The past few weeks had stripped her bare, but what remained was unshakable. On the kitchen counter lay a thin folder, the first draft of her legal complaint. Her lawyer, a calm woman named Denise Harper, had told her it would be hard. "They'll question everything," she'd warned, "your motives, your character, even your silence." "I'm not here to be pitied," Claire had said quietly. "I'm here to tell the truth. Now." With the city stirring outside, she picked up the folder, tucked it under her arm, and stepped into the rain. Again. The rain. It seemed to follow every turning point of her life, falling not to drown her, but to wash something clean. At the same time, miles away, in Crosswind Tower, Nathaniel stood in the dim glow of his office, reviewing files that should never have existed. For days he'd been digging through emails, security logs, archived communications. It was a sleepless blur of fury and focus. And then, finally, he found it. A metadata trail buried in an email server. Images uploaded from an account tied not to the press, but to Victoria Hale, his former fiancée, Crosswind's PR strategist, and the woman who'd walked back into his company just as the scandal began. He stared at the screen, jaw clenched, pulse steady. When he called her in, she came smiling, polished, perfect. "Nathaniel," she said smoothly, "you look like you haven't slept. The board's happy with your compliance statement, by the way." He didn't look up. "Sit down." The smile faltered. Is everything he turned the screen toward her. "Don't!" Her voice stilled. The images glowed between them, attachments traced to her credentials, time-stamped the week before the leak. For a long moment, the only sound was the hum of the office lights. He rose slowly. "You destroyed someone's life for a headline." Her tone hardened. "You destroyed your own when you forgot who you are. You're a crosswind." "Nathaniel? You belong in the boardroom, not chasing sympathy for a girl who—" "Don't you dare," he said, the quiet steel in his voice cutting through the air. "Don't you dare speak about her like that." Victoria's mask cracked, just slightly. "You really think the world will believe her over me?" "They won't need to," he said, picking up a small flash drive from the desk. "They'll see the truth for themselves." For the first time, her confidence faltered completely. "You wouldn't. I already did." He walked past her, the rain hammering against the windows like applause. That afternoon, the story broke again this time, with proof. Anonymous uploads revealed falsified communications, staged leaks, and a PR trail that led directly to Victoria Hale. The same outlets that had feasted on Claire's humiliation now scrambled to rewrite their headlines. In her apartment, Claire's phone began buzzing non-stop. Rachel's voice came through the line breathless. "Claire, you're trending again. But this time, it's different. They're saying you were framed." Nathaniel exposed everything. Claire stood frozen, the sound of rain outside blurring the words. "What, it's over. You should turn on the news." But she didn't. She just stood there, hand trembling, the weight of it all beginning to lift slowly, painfully, like something too heavy being set down. Later that evening, she met her lawyer at the courthouse. Reporters had gathered outside, shouting questions. Claire walked through them calmly, Denise by her side, umbrella steady overhead. "Ms. Bennett, do you have anything to say about the new evidence?" She paused on the courthouse steps, the cameras flashing like lightning. Her voice, when she spoke, was low and clear. "Yes," she said. "For months, people believed lies because they were easier to hear than the truth. I lost my job, my reputation, and my peace because of it. But I want you to know this dignity doesn't disappear when people lie about you. It waits." The crowd went quiet. "And now," she continued softly, "the truth is no longer waiting." Inside, her statement was filed. Outside, the rain kept falling. Nathaniel watched the coverage from his office, the tension in his chest loosening for the first time in weeks. When Claire appeared on screen standing calm against the noise, voice steady, something in him broke open. Pride, relief, awe. Victoria's resignation came within hours. Her last message to him was short. "You've made your choice. I hope she's worth it." He didn't reply. That night, he left the office early. The rain had turned gentle, like the city itself was exhaling. Across the street from Claire's apartment, he waited not out of presumption, but hesitation. She deserved space. Still, part of him needed to see her, to know she was all right. Through the glass, he saw her silhouette by the window. No makeup, no armor, just Claire reading something. Maybe letters, maybe headlines. She looked up once, as if sensing him there. Their eyes didn't meet, but it was enough. Later, she opened her door to find a small envelope slipped beneath it. Inside, one line in his handwriting: "I never wanted to save you. Claire, I just wanted you to know I was finally brave enough to stand beside you." She read it twice, then set it on her table beside the old coffee mug she never replaced. Her reflection in the window was steady. The truth was out, the lies undone. But healing, she knew, wasn't about headlines or justice. It was about reclaiming the quiet, the ability to breathe again without fear. She whispered to herself, almost like a promise, no more shame. Outside, the city glowed gold through the rain. Somewhere far above, thunder rolled softly. But this time, it didn't sound like warning. It sounded like release. And when morning came, for the first time in a long while, the sky was clear. The boardroom was silent. Only the rain pressed faintly against the tall windows, a rhythm steady enough to sound like a heartbeat. Nathaniel sat at the head of the long oak table. His father opposite him, gray suit, sharper eyes, voice cold as polished steel. "You've made a mess," his father said quietly, "and now you'll clean it, effective immediately. The board is calling for your resignation from the CEO chair. You'll stay on as a consultant, of course at a reduced capacity, until this dies down." Nathaniel leaned back in his chair. "And if I don't?" The older man didn't blink. "Then you lose everything. The company, the name, the trust, the empire your grandfather built. I won't let you take it down with you." Nathaniel looked at him for a long time, the silence stretching. The word empire hung in the air like a burden. For so many years, that word had been his compass, his measure of worth, his inheritance, his prison. He thought of Claire, her quiet strength, the way she faced the storm with dignity, the way truth mattered more to her than power ever could. He straightened his shoulders. "You're right," he said softly. "I did make a mess." His father exhaled, relieved, ready to reclaim control. "Good. Then you'll step down quietly, but I'm not cleaning it by pretending," Nathaniel interrupted. "I'm done protecting lies." The older man froze. "What did you just say?" Nathaniel stood slowly, the chair's soft scrape echoing like a closing door. "I'm not stepping down to keep your name untarnished. I'm walking away because I finally understand what it cost me to carry it." For a moment, neither spoke. The rain filled the silence. His father's face hardened. "If you walk out that door, Nathaniel, you're no son of mine." He gave a faint smile, one more sad than defiant. "Then maybe it's time you had a son who could look you in the eye." And he walked. No shouting, no drama, just the sound of his footsteps fading into the long corridor, his reflection dissolving into the glass like smoke. Outside, the storm had passed. The city shimmered under the kind of light that only comes after rain, fragile, honest, forgiving. That evening, Claire sat in the small cafe where she sometimes went to write. The corner table, her usual seat, faced the window. She didn't notice him at first, just the door opening, the small chime above it, then his voice. "Is this seat taken?" Her breath caught. She looked up. Nathaniel stood there, no suit, no tie, just a man stripped of the weight he'd carried for too long. His hair was damp from the rain. His expression was quiet, almost unsure. She gestured to the chair. "It's free." He sat. For a moment, neither spoke. The world outside went on the hiss of espresso machines, the chatter of strangers, the smell of cinnamon and coffee. It felt almost too ordinary for what it was. "Finally," he said. I walked away. She looked at him carefully. From what he hesitated, then met her eyes. "From everything that made me forget who I am." Her fingers tightened slightly around her cup. "That's a lot to leave behind." He nodded. "It was, but keeping it meant losing myself." and losing you. Silence again, not empty this time, but full of something fragile, alive. Claire looked down, her voice soft. You can't fix what happened with grand gestures. Nathaniel, you can't erase the hurt. I know. He said, I don't want to erase it. I just don't want to live behind it anymore. She studied him for a long time, his face lined with exhaustion, but his eyes clear, unguarded. The man who once saw her as a mistake now looked at her like truth. He leaned forward slightly, voice low. I'm not choosing you out of guilt or pity. I'm choosing you because, for the first time, I see you. And because I want to build something real, not an empire, not a reputation, just something honest. Her throat tightened. And if that doesn't work, he smiled faintly, then at least it'll be ours. She looked away, toward the rain-streaked window. For a moment, the city blurred behind the glass, all gold and gray. Then she turned back to him, her eyes softer now. You're stubborn, she said quietly. He chuckled. You have no idea. The sound made her laugh, small but real, the first in what felt like months. She reached across the table, not quite touching his hand, but close enough that the space between them hummed with memory. He didn't rush her. He just sat there, letting the quiet hold them both. Outside. The rain started again. Light this time, not a storm, just a reminder. When they finally stood to leave, the cafe lights flickered gently, the air warm and thick with the smell of coffee and rain. As they stepped into the street, Nathaniel paused. Where do you want to go? She thought for a moment, then smiled, forward. He nodded, as if that was enough. Maybe it was. They walked together under a single umbrella, the kind you have to share carefully so you don't bump shoulders too often. It felt clumsy, human, perfect, behind them. The city glowed in reflection-wet streets, passing headlights, a world slowly forgiving itself. For the first time, neither of them was running. And somewhere, deep inside the rhythm of rain and steps and silence, both of them understood love isn't about what survives the storm. It's about what you build after it. The afternoon light stretched long and golden across the valley. Rows of grapevines rippled gently in the wind, their leaves whispering against one another like a quiet applause. The air smelled faintly of earth and ripe fruit, warm, clean, alive. Claire stood on the porch of their small office, Bennett Cross Consulting, etched in brass beside the door. The name still made her smile every time she saw it, not because of what it represented, but because of how simply it had come to be. No grand branding, no fanfare, just two names, side by side, equal, through the window. She could see Nathaniel bent over a table, sleeves rolled up, glasses sliding down his nose as he worked through a client proposal. His hair had grown a little longer since their city days. There was softness to him now, the kind that comes from finally being at peace. Mr. Cross, she called, teasing. You're going to miss the sunset again. He looked up, smiling. Not if you keep reminding me. He joined her outside, resting his hand lightly at her back. Together they watched the sky melt into shades of amber and rose, the vineyard glowing as if lit from within. From somewhere down the hill, laughter rose, Evelyn and Rachel arriving early for dinner. The sound carried easily through the open air, light and familiar. Claire turned to wave as they climbed the path. Evelyn's hair was grayer now, but her spirit hadn't changed. She wrapped Claire in a hug that was part pride, part disbelief. You did it, honey. You really did. Rachel grinned, holding up a bottle of wine. Well, technically, we did. I did the tasting. It's a team effort. Nathaniel laughed softly. A dangerous team. They all settled around the long wooden table on the porch. Dinner was simple roasted vegetables, fresh bread, a salad picked that morning from the small garden out back. The kind of meal that invited conversation more than ceremony. As the evening deepened, stories began to flow. Old memories, shared jokes, quiet pauses, the kind that stretch like soft fabric, nothing forced, nothing sharp. At one point, Evelyn placed her hand over Claire's. "You seem lighter," she said softly. "Happier." Claire smiled. "I think I stopped fighting what hurt and started listening to what healed." Her mother nodded, eyes glistening just a little. "That's my girl." Rachel poured more wine. "And the view doesn't hurt either." Laughter rose again, full and easy. After dinner, the four of them lingered beneath the string lights Nathaniel had hung along the porch beams. Fireflies blinked in the tall grass. The night hummed with crickets and the faint rhythm of the river below. Claire leaned back, her hand resting instinctively on her stomach. It was still too early for most to notice, but she felt it, the small pulse of something new, something fragile and extraordinary. Nathaniel noticed the gesture, his eyes softening as they met hers. No words passed between them, just a shared breath, a quiet knowing. Later, when Evelyn and Rachel said their goodbyes and the night turned cooler, Nathaniel gathered the dishes while Claire stayed outside. The stars had come out sharp and bright against the dark velvet of the sky. She wrapped her arms around herself, not from cold, but from awe. It had been exactly 1 year since that night, the night everything had fallen apart. The marble floor, the laughter, the shame, and yet, standing here, surrounded by the gentle hum of life reborn, she felt something different, not triumph, not revenge, just peace. She walked slowly toward the vineyard, the grass cool under her bare feet. The vines glimmered faintly under starlight, each leaf catching a touch of silver. She reached out, brushed her fingers against one, and whispered, almost to herself, "Thank you." From the porch, Nathaniel's voice carried softly through the night. "You talking to plants again?" She turned, smiling. "Maybe." He came to stand beside her, hands in his pockets. They seemed to listen better than most people. "They do," she said, leaning gently against him. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with the sounds of wind and distant owls. Nathaniel glanced toward the valley, the faint lights of nearby vineyards blinking like small promises. "You ever think about how far we've come?" Claire nodded slowly. "Sometimes I think about how far we fell first." He looked at her, half smiling, and yet, somehow, we landed right here. She met his gaze, warmth blooming through her chest. Maybe that's the point. For a while, they just stood there, letting the night settle around them. The world didn't feel like it was rushing anymore. It was breathing steady, patient, alive. When they finally turned back toward the house, Claire paused at the door. Her hand lingered on the frame, her voice quiet, steady. "Sometimes," she said, "the worst night of your life isn't your ending." Nathaniel tilted his head. "No?" She smiled faintly. "It's your invitation to begin again." He didn't reply, he just took her hand, their fingers interlacing naturally, as if they'd been made to fit, inside. The lights glowed warm and golden. On the counter, a single glass of wine caught the reflection of the stars outside, trembling slightly in the soft wind that moved through the open door. And somewhere between the night and the dawn, between everything lost and everything found, two hearts finally rested, not because the story was over, but because it had truly begun. Sometimes, life doesn't fall apart to punish us. It falls apart to rebuild us. Claire's story reminds us that dignity isn't something others give. It's something we hold, even when the world looks away. The worst moments, the humiliation, the loss, the nights that feel endless can become quiet invitations to rediscover who we truly are. We learn that forgiveness is not weakness, but freedom. That love, when stripped of pride and fear, becomes less about rescue and more about recognition. As we grow older, it's easy to believe our chances for change have passed. But healing doesn't follow age, it follows courage. Sometimes starting over isn't about a new beginning in the world. It's about finding peace within the life we already have. Like Claire and Nathaniel, we are all given moments to choose between bitterness and grace, between protecting our image or protecting our soul. And when we choose grace, when we dare to stand up, even quietly, for truth and kindness, life often rewards us with something we never expected, a second beginning that feels more honest than the first. Thank you so much for spending your time with Shining Stories. If this story touched your heart or reminded you of someone you love, please give it a like. It helps our little corner of the world keep shining. Share it with a friend who might need a bit of hope tonight. And don't forget to subscribe for more gentle, heartfelt stories about love, dignity, and second chances. Until next time, take care of your heart and keep believing in new beginnings.